Club and Black Men United, and we are the Black Student Union. This is our second program, and to get a little bit about BSU, if you didn't come to our first program, we were founded in 1969, and we are the largest multicultural organization on this campus. We do a lot of community service. We have a lot of programs every Wednesday in this room. We just do a lot of stuff for the students, for everybody here. And I'm the vice president. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. And we're going to start the program.
All right. So as she's told us, tonight's presentation is on the new voter ID legislation, and so it was House Bill 934, the voter ID law. And so it was passed March 14th of this year, and basically what it does is now in order to vote, you have to present a valid identification. And a valid ID is defined as a state-issued driver's license or photo ID. You can also use a passport or military ID, things like that. Or you can also use a college ID from an accredited Pennsylvania public or private university. And what any of these identifications must have are a name, a photo, and a current expiration date. So if you don't have such an ID, you can still vote, and what you will need to do is cast a provisional ballot. And so these are used when there's some type of question of eligibility, such as if you don't have an ID or if you are not on the poll block. And so an election official, if they question your eligibility, will tell you that you have to cast a provisional ballot. And so these are also required in cases of voting as a result of poll voters. So if someone sues you and tells you you must vote, you have to do this, and voting past the time of closing. So if you do have to cast a provisional ballot, you'll be asked to do all of the following. And it seems like a long list, but it's not. You'll have to complete and sign your provisional ballot affidavit, and on the back of your ballot envelope. Once you've completed that in an accessible private area, so basically where you would normally vote, you just seal the envelope and you return it to the election official, and you will receive your receipt for this, which you will then have to send in within 6 days with proof of ID. Not too bad, but hopefully nobody will have to do that. So why is this an issue? This has come up a lot in discussions around campus. And so it's estimated that about 758,000 registered voters are not going to be able to vote in the original election because of this. So to kind of bring that down to a more local level, that's right about 186,000 registered Philadelphia voters who lack this necessary ID. That's about 18% of Philadelphia voters. And what's interesting is, to my knowledge, there have been no cases of in-person voter fraud. So it seems as if this legislation is really trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And so, to get some context on these claims of political corruption, we have a lovely map from Transparency International, which is a nonprofit based in Germany that studies so, as we can see based on this map, probably you can't see the little box too well at the bottom, but what it does is it establishes a 10-point scale of corruption. And so you'll see countries like Finland and Sweden up there, they're dark blue, very low levels of corruption. And then you will see the very dark red countries, they are countries of higher corruption. You'll notice that America is light blue. It's about the third least corrupt political climate you can find. So it just kind of backs up that kind of case that there's not really an issue going on here. So now we have a lovely clip from the difficulties. Sorry, everybody.
Dorothy Cooper is a 96-year-old resident of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and has been voting for the last 75 years. This year, she's been told she can't. A new law in Tennessee requires residents to show a government-issued photo ID in order to vote. Dorothy Cooper doesn't have a driver's license because Dorothy Cooper doesn't have a car. Dorothy Cooper doesn't have a passport. A vacation abroad was never in her future. Tennessee isn't alone. At this moment, 33 states have proposed or already adopted the same voter ID laws that have disqualified Dorothy Cooper from the one fundamental thing that we all do as Americans. It's estimated that 11%, or roughly 20 million people, don't have government-issued voter IDs and will be disenfranchised this November. Why? To crack down on the terrible problem of voter fraud. Governor Rick Perry of Texas, who is about to enter the presidential primary race, is serious about cracking down on the problem.
Making sure that there's not fraud, making sure that someone's not manipulating that process makes all the sense in the world to me.
To me too, because voter fraud is such a huge problem that during a 5-year period under the Bush administration, when 196 million votes were cast, the number of cases of voter fraud reached 86. Not 86,000, 86. Here's what that number looks like as a percentage of votes cast. 4/100,000ths of a percent. This would be called a solution without a problem, but it's not. It's just a solution to a different problem. Republicans have a hard time getting certain people to vote for them, so life would be a lot easier if certain people just weren't allowed to vote at all. I'm ashamed to say that 32 of the 33 voter ID laws were proposed by Republican legislators and passed by Republican-controlled state houses and signed into law by Republican governors. I am not, however, ashamed to say that I am a Republican. And that brings us to tonight's second story.
Okay, so some people who are affected by these voter laws are some senior citizens, and some facts I have about that. In the 13 southeastern counties, including Philadelphia, 8.3 million voters are accounted for, but about 15% of those over 65 may not have valid ID. The reason you will see more seniors without ID is because many have voluntarily given up driver's license and do not do things that require a state ID.
Alright, I'm going to talk about the minorities and impoverished individuals. Impoverished individuals are like poor people, if y'all didn't know that. Okay, 11% of Americans, which is over about 21 million, do not have a government-issued photo ID. How many of you guys in here have like a photo ID? Okay, that's looking good. That's looking good. All right, some minorities / poor people can't even afford an ID because of their status or anything like that. Do you guys know anybody who can't like afford those fees to get an ID? Couple? Anybody know people who can't afford it? Okay. Pretty much what I think the law is doing is taking away, like, you know, I'm a minority and I would consider myself poor. So I think they're like taking away our right to like vote and, you know, like let our voice be heard for the most part. And here's some facts. About 170,000 to 475,000 African Americans probably won't be able to vote because of this law. And 68,000 to 250,000 Hispanic people won't be able to vote. 13,000 to 46,000 Asian people won't be able to vote. 1,700 to 6,400 Native Americans won't be able to vote. And 700 to 2,700 Pacific Islanders won't vote, according to the CBS News. So that's a big majority, like taking them away from the presidential election. And honestly, I don't think it's fair. And we could change that by just registering to vote, you know. So do that. Barack the vote.
So now what we're going to talk about are reasons why people might not have an acceptable form of identification for voting. There are certainly a lot of people who have been kind of blaming the victim here, which is it really isn't productive because there are a lot of perfectly legitimate reasons why you might not be able to get or have a voter ID. So probably the most common is not being a driver. If you live in a city, you probably take public transportation everywhere simply because it's easier, and therefore it's not really important to have that driver's license when you turn 16. Another major cause is a lot of people are not born in hospitals, and so if you're not born there and you don't have I believe it's a nurse practitioner, they're birthing you, it becomes very difficult to get either a birth certificate or a social security card. And so without either of those, I mean, it's almost impossible to get that all-important ID. And another one that people really don't think of often are document discrepancies. And anyway, that would be like if your name is different from document to document, for instance, is a very common issue. So if your driver's license says one thing and your birth certificate says another, that's going to be an issue. And also if your voter registration card says one thing and the poll book, which is the book of everybody who's a registered voter that they have at polling places, if there's a discrepancy between that and your voter registration, they are going to make you cast that provisional ballot, which you don't want to do if such can be avoided. So, what can we do to ensure that we will be able to vote? The most important thing is registering by October 6th, because you have a month before the election, which is November 6th. So, just vote or register as soon as you can. And you also want to ensure that you have proper identification before you go to the polling place. And so I know around campus we will be giving out stickers for student IDs because up until this year, student IDs didn't have expiration dates. And so it is very easy if you live on campus to get the ID that you need to in order to vote. And so another thing you can do is make sure all of your documents match. So if you're a Republican thinking about switching to be a Democrat or an independent, switching to be a Republican or something, don't do that. Just wait until after the election. And this is a very trivial one, but also super important. Know where your polling place is. Mine is at Valley Forge Middle School, so I drive out there, but you can also vote on campus, which is really important to know, but you have to register to Westchester in order to do so, if I'm not mistaken. So once you've done these things, just please go vote. Like, your voice is not heard if you don't vote. It's the really only way that you as an individual can impact politics at all. I mean, if you have lots and lots of money or a company, you can perhaps lobby, but most of us can't do that, so just go out and vote. It's very easy, and you can get out of many things using voting as an excuse, so just go do it. So, regardless of why this legislation was passed, the important things that we need to know are, first and foremost, our rights. Don't let anybody turn you away because you don't have an ID. Really stand up for yourself, cast that provisional ballot, and follow the steps that they're telling you to, and get that proof of ID within 6 days. Make sure you're registered. Can't stress that enough, and just get out to vote. And so at this point, we have an individual who is actually running for office, and he is here to field any questions that we might have. Sorry. forget your name and what you're running for. I'm a terrible person, I've ruined everything, but...
Hi, my name is Bret Binder. Can everyone hear me without the mic? I have a relatively loud voice. My name is Bret Binder. I am running for State House here. So if you're registered in this area, I am your Democratic candidate. I came down for a couple reasons. I came down to talk to you about the voter ID bill, but I also wanted to put it into a bigger context. I used to be a law clerk for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So what I can really do is address a little bit of the review. This is actually going to be heard in oral argument tomorrow in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and it's possible this whole law could be thrown out. But I'm happy to talk about the mechanics of it. What's more important is you understand that this is really just an attempt to make your vote not count. This is not the first attempt. Earlier this year, there was an attempt to redistrict. Has anybody heard the term redistricting? Are people familiar with the term gerrymandering? Yes, so this district was perhaps the prime example of what a gerrymandered district looked like. And what they did is they were specifically targeting you. They were taking half of Westchester University and moving it down into Delaware County. And they were doing that because that's a highly Republican area. The whole attempt of that redistricting map was in order to throw out, to make your vote not count, to dilute your vote. The whole attempt of the voter ID law is to throw out student votes, which tend to be Democratic votes, and to throw out senior citizen votes, to throw out lower income family votes, because they tend to be Democratic. I actually went with, there was a student, Rich Miller, who was a grad student here, and Mayor Carolyn Committa, and I all went to Harrisburg, and we testified against the redistricting. And we went up on the trial lawyer by day, so I went up with these big blown up charts. It showed what the map looked like, and it showed this little finger come up through East Bradford Township and then cut over and take out half the university from Delaware County. It was the most ridiculous looking map you've seen. We blew it up. The commission that was in charge of it looked at it. I think they were blown away when you see it sort of life size. And ultimately, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw out that redistricting. They've since tried to redistrict again, and they're keeping Westchester University whole this time. But it's again being challenged because they're doing everything they can to make sure that there's a Republican victory in November. In fact, the House leader talking about the voter ID bill was quoted, the Republican House leader was quoted as saying, "We passed the voter ID bill that ensures a Romney win. What's next on our agenda?" And that was put forth in front of the Commonwealth Court where they challenged this voter ID law. It's an amazing law. The state went in, and I apologize if I rambled a little bit, but this is really important stuff. And the state went in and they stipulated and said, you know how many cases of voter fraud we have over the last 4 years? 0. They said that from the get-go. They didn't try to put on any evidence that showed that there was any voter fraud. They said day one, we have 0 evidence of voter fraud. But we still need to spend $11 million of the state money, disenfranchise. The numbers have actually moved from 780,000 to up to 1.5 million people to be disenfranchised. That's a huge number of people that may not have the fundamental right to vote. And it is important, you guys need to do another step. Even though now that there is a solution, you can go, you can get an expiration date on your voter ID, on your school ID card, you need to take another step. And that's enough to discourage a lot of people from voting. A lot of people, you need to go tell everybody you know. Go out, get that sticker on your card so you can show up on election day and you can vote. It's all just designed to be another hurdle. One of the speakers in front of me, and I'm sorry, I forgot his name, talked about not being able to afford to get the documents you need. Originally, you would have to pay, it was only a $10 fee to get your birth certificate. You had to wait months to get it. And there's some people who can't drive to go down to order their birth certificate. Once they get it, they can't afford, they don't have a car, they don't have a way of getting to voter registration, the Department of Motor Vehicles to get a photo ID. It's a major issue. It's not an issue to be taken lightly. A lot of people say, "Oh, everybody's got a driver's license." It's not the case. Up to 1.5 million people may not be able to vote. And as I say, it's particularly targeted towards you. The guy who's in the seat, I'll do a little plug for myself now. The guy who's in this seat won by 208 votes in 2010. What did he want? He backed the plan to get half of you moved into Delaware County. Because he wants to win this seat. He wants your vote not to count. Same thing with the voter ID bill. You're trying to get your vote not to count. So I need you to vote. I guess I'll stay up. I don't know if I'm supposed to answer questions now. Afterwards, I'm happy talk about the case, about how the law plays out. So, do people have questions on how the law plays out? You had your hand up a couple times.
What do you think was the catalyst for it to be like actual this year? And I'm just like so sad because we know such a proper last election. But I'm just like, why? It's just it baffles me because you guys are saying that, oh, there was no fraud, and all that stuff. How is it that it was still able to get put into legislation and up until now, like I feel like this month, the last month, you see the rules, oh yeah, let's do something to repeal it. Because in Texas, weren't they able to repeal it?
Texas, so the question was why this year? Why were voter ID laws being put in this year? And there was a case in Texas about a similar voter ID law. The Texas case was thrown out. Now that was a federal challenge as opposed to a state challenge. And they showed that there was a discriminatory impact. And that was thrown out. That's actually not the basis of the challenge in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is being challenged on a few reasons, including it's more burdensome than helpful section. The law does no good, does a lot of harm. Why this year? It's because of the harm. The goal is to get a bomb out. And in order to do that, they're resorting to every trick they can, which is including not listening to the will of the people. They're going to prevent people from voting. That's the whole reason why it's this year. The reason why you're hearing more about it now, I actually went around and told people that the Commonwealth Court, which is the first court where they challenged the voter ID law, was going to throw it out as unconstitutional. It is a terribly drafted law. It is not constitutional. I can say that, I say that until I'm blue in the face. I was shocked when the Commonwealth Court judge wrote a very long opinion that said, this is a terribly written law, there's no evidence of fraud, but you know what, they've already started it, so I'm going to let it go. It's a Republican judge. It's now in front of the PA Supreme Court by former bosses. There are only 6 justices right now, one of them's in jail. Republican justice, by the way. Justice Ori Melvin. She's in jail for campaign finance fraud. But it's a split court, 3 Republicans, 3 Dems. And there's a question as to what's going to happen with it. I'm hoping that just like last time, the Chief Justice, who is a Republican, voted with the Dems and threw out the redistricting. I'm hoping that he also throws out the voter ID law.
Hello? Okay, cool. How do you, okay, so I'm part of Citizens United, and we have a lot of these meetings about, you know, a lot of minorities not really believing in their voice because they don't trust politicians. So how do you expect us, minorities, senior citizens, college students, to even trust our government if you even, I quote you with that judge who says, oh yeah, we're just gonna keep it in legislation that's already gone through. How are we supposed to gain trust in our government again if they're always imposing these legislations knowing that it's gonna disenfranchise us?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I'll tell you that the best thing you can do is instead of being apathetic and saying, look, I can't make a difference, and the system's set against me, is fighting against it. And actually, I was talking with one of your professors beforehand, who just came back in, about during the redistricting, what's very inspiring is, do you know who got the redistricting thrown out? The person you can give the most credit to is a woman named Amanda Holt. You'll never heard of her. She's a Republican committee woman and a music teacher in the middle of Pennsylvania. She spent a year of her life drafting an alternate plan, alternate map to the redistricting. She drafted it so it would be constitutional. She drafted it to show how much better it could be. She filed an appeal. She got an attorney who worked on it pro bono. But some woman with no real political background, she wasn't a major activist. She was just offended by the gerrymandering that was going on. And she appealed and she wound up getting an unprecedented. Everybody would have told you that redistricting map was going to be upheld because you've never heard of a redistricting map being thrown out. It doesn't happen. It only happens every 10 years that they redistrict. Gerrymandering occurs all the time. Of course, it basically said, we don't like gerrymandering, but there's nothing we can do about it. School teacher, 29 years old from the middle of Pennsylvania, got it thrown out. You have her to thank for the fact that your vote now might mean something in this district. So my answer is, don't be discouraged by it. Instead, use it to motivate yourself to do more. I don't like guys like me. I'll fight for you.
I was just wondering about some of the numbers I heard thrown around, because when I was looking at this, I heard that it was 758,000 weren't eligible, and I heard 1.3 3 million weren't eligible, and I heard me 1.5 weren't eligible. Just wondering, what's the difference? Why is there a difference?
There is a difference. So the question is how you interpret it, and it's very difficult to comb through all the voter rolls to find out what the problems may be. When they started as well, they said with the original law, there was a discrepancy, you couldn't vote. So that meant, if somebody, sorry, I blanked on your name, so turnabout's fair play. Jackson. Mentioned earlier that if your voter ID didn't match what your driver's license said, that included if you had a middle initial on one and your full middle name on the other. The state has since said, no, we didn't need mentions because they got so much backlash over it. We don't mean it, it's okay if there's substantially similar. Now one of the issues is what if you have a woman's married and has a hyphenated name? Originally that didn't count, maybe it does count, we don't really know. And they keep changing. There's actually been 6 different announcements from the Department of State that have changed how this law is supposed to be interpreted. So the law itself is unconstitutional. What the state is doing is trying to backtrack and say, well, if you think that's unconstitutional, no, we'll allow the middle name to be different. That's okay. Well, as long as it's substantially similar, we're going to leave it up to the judge of elections, which means you'll have an uneven application of this law, which is also unconstitutional in and of itself. So the numbers come because it's very hard to pin down how many people have a mismatched ID or what they're going to say is a mismatched ID. There's a website you can go to called Corbett'sList.com. It's Governor Corbett's last name, so Corbett'sList.com, no apostrophe. You can type in your name there and you can find out if you're on the list as likely having a problem between your voter ID and whatever form of identification you may use. So go to that site, Corbett'sList.com, check it out. I also urge all of you to register here. You have till October 6th to do so. Register in this area, your vote makes a difference. October 9th, I'm sorry, holiday. Yeah, October 9th. But register here. Do it by the 6th anyway. Keep yourself elected. Other questions? Okay, well then, fine.
Thank you, Jesse. How does the voter laws affect, like, someone who wasn't born in the United States but is a United States citizen?
No, I've never been asked that question. It would be, presumably, it would be the same issue, just as wherever you register to vote, when you register to vote, you have to sign, that's what they match at a polling station. You sign your name next to your name that's already in the book, for those of you who voted before. It would be the same thing, your voter ID just has to match, whatever form of photo ID you have has to match what's in the book.
Would they take like a birth certificate, but like the birth certificate would of course be not American?
No, you need to have a photo ID, a government issued photo ID. Passport would work. So it's a passport. Right, a foreign passport would work, although
I mean, if you're a U.S. citizen, so you have the right to vote regardless of where you were born, right? So that, itself gives you the right to vote and then register to make sure you have a photo ID with you, whether it's your Pennsylvania driver's license, a passport, or university ID with a sticker on it. You get. Did you guys talk about the sticker yet?
yes.
You did. Okay, sorry.
But yeah, but one thing you'll see is actually most people who are foreign born and then register to vote here never miss a vote. And I think that's a lesson to everybody. Get out and vote. It is your right. It's a very important right. And everybody should be angry that someone's trying to take away their right to vote.
I have a friend, one more question. I have a friend, she registered to vote in 2008. She wants to know if she's still registered.
Yes, wherever you register to vote now, if you register to vote in your hometown, that's where you have to go to vote, or you have to get an absentee ballot. And if you get absentee ballots, that's actually important for anybody here who's still registered and lives somewhere else.
Has there been any purging of voter rolls in PA that you know of, or where I'm not there, and I don't think it happened in Chester County, for example. Meaning, you have to kind of update it every 4 years, 6 years, or 8 years. That happens in some places.
It hasn't happened here as far as I know, but if you are registered somewhere else, you're registered in your hometown, either register to vote here, which I will certainly encourage you to do, or get an absentee ballot. which you can get absentee ballot applications from OFA headquarters, which are on J Street, 533 East J Street. You can go in there, you can pick up an absentee ballot, you can contact my offices. I'm going to leave a little literature here, so anybody on their way out who wants to grab it, contact me or my offices. We will get you an absentee application. You send it in, they send you a ballot, you fill out the ballot, you send it in, and it gets counted. And actually, I'm just going to use that as a segue too. We talked very briefly about the provisional ballots. That's a much bigger deal than everybody realized. In 2008, there were long waiting lines to vote. Obama had everybody out to vote. Long waiting line. Provisional ballots take a long time to fill out. There's a dispute, you stand there, nobody knows what they're doing. It slows down the whole line, it discourages people from voting. People in line, they're 2 hours, 3 hours, they turn around, they go home. So the provisional ballots are a big deal, and those provisional ballots don't count unless you go back and take another step to prove who you are. That's a major issue. Most people fill out provisional ballots, they don't go back within 6 days. I think this year it's 7 days because of the holiday. But they don't go back and prove who they are. You just go down and actually prove who you were. So those provisional ballots often never count. That's a major issue. So don't take the provisional ballots like that. There was a question way in the back.
You mentioned the number 11 million in enforcement. You'd have to spend $11 million to enforce this law. Where does that money go? What exactly would cost that much money about, pulling out your ID and showing it to somebody? Is there...
Well, have you been getting literature about the voter ID laws from the state? They've got to pay for that literature.
Okay.
Have there been lawsuits about it? I don't want to know what the legal fees were. I'm relatively cheap as an attorney. I'm telling you, they're not using a firm like mine. They're using a large Center City firm, racking up legal bills on the town. There are costs in administrating, in checking the voter rolls and having people oversee it, and enforcing the law. They've estimated it's at least $11 million. At this point, it's probably more. I just haven't seen an updated number, so I stick with the 11 million. But it's $11 million when we have 0 cases of voter fraud. That's at a time when they've cut 40% of state funding to Westchester University over the last 2 years. Everyone noticed their tuition went up? Some of you may be correct. Why is that? It's because they've cut state funding to higher education in Pennsylvania. At the same time, we'll spend $11 million to try to prevent you from voting. I don't mean to be doom and gloom up here. You have an opportunity to do something. It's to get out the vote. Tell your friends to get out the vote. Make sure you register. Vote. I will tell you to vote Dem from the top down. But there are good Republicans out there. But I'm still going to tell you to vote Dem from the top down. Going to jail. Not jail yet.
You mentioned the Supreme Court and how it's only 6 members. What do you think the percentage is that it will get overturned and thrown out? Because I think if it's a 3-3 split, it's still upheld, and if it goes their way, it's hold. So
it's always tough to ask a lawyer what they think the outcome of the case is going to be. And what I will tell you is I was almost certain that the Commonwealth Court was going to throw it out. The judge who heard it is known to be a fairly reasonable judge, even though he's a Republican judge. He's known to be somewhat independent. I thought he would throw it out. So I will tell you that my guess may not be worth anything at this point. Now, I worked for the PA Supreme Court, so I do know those justices. I think Chief Justice Castile, who's the one who switched, I mentioned on the redistricting, I think he's worried about his legacy. He's not up to be elected again. Judges in Pennsylvania are elected, which is a whole other issue. But he's not up to be elected again. He's in until he's forced out by mandatory age. I think he's worried about his legacy. I think there's a good chance he's switching. There's also another justice, Justice Saylor, who's a Republican, but he's fairly independent-minded, and he is a strict believer in the Constitution. I think there is a small chance he can flip. Between the two of them, I have high hopes. And it helps the Texas courts did throw it out, even though that was on federal provision. There's some precedent now for throwing out these laws. There's a backlash. What can you do? Don't get apathetic. My person who asked that question moved. Don't get apathetic is the question. Don't get discouraged by the fact that there's so many people seemingly out to get your vote. Instead, go out there and do something about it.
Whatever they see in front of them, that's what they want to do. Like, in the media, that politics really isn't that popular, so that's not what they're gonna do. And for instance, we had what was it, last week with the Democratic convention, we had Barack Obama speaking, and then we had like the movie awards, or what was it, VH1? Why is it that they had those two at the same time, and then they had all the young votes look at the award ceremony, and then they didn't even they weren't even watching Barack Obama speak. So I feel like the corruption is so far up in.
It's not just corruption, it's knowing the issues. A lot of people don't know, and I commend everybody who came tonight and gave up your night to come out here and listen to me. I'm not the most captivating speaker in the world, I'll admit. But you came out to listen, you listened to a slideshow, you're getting educated. And so the answer is, again, it's yes, people are distracted. Yes, there's a government that isn't always responding, they're always looking out for your interests. But everybody in this room is an example of you came out to learn about it. Now you need to go out and tell everybody else you know and impress upon them how important this is. That's how you get a movement started, that's how you make a change. So everybody here needs, I commend you for doing it, now you gotta do more.
And I just want to add on to that, don't be a distraction. You know, educate yourself. There's political shows that come on Sunday that talk about the issues. You choose to watch an award show over the Democratic convention. So just educate yourself and know what's going on out there.
And I'll tell you, it's not as bad as you think. Right here we have Tyler who's working on Senator Dimmon's campaign. That's your local state senator here. He's very active in that campaign. Rich Miller, who was a grad student here, went with me and the mayor up to Harrisburg to testify against redistricting. People get motivated and they make a difference. So you really want to make a difference, volunteer. Volunteer at OFA headquarters, or I'll tell you better yet, volunteer for my campaign. But either way, volunteer, get active, go tell people, go canvassing. I door knock every day. I spend about 3 hours a day knocking on people's doors, making sure they're registered, telling them about the issue. You can do the same thing, and you can go out to your friends here. You can go out to areas of Westchester where students live, knock on doors, make sure they're registered, make sure they have a voter ID. That makes a big difference. I got 1 by 208 votes. You guys knocking on enough doors swings that election. Any other? Okay, well thank you everybody for your time. I'll leave a little literature